I don't know what I was thinking, but I bought a bushel of peaches. So come along and see what I'm going to do with them. Hey friends, it's Barbara Sue at Kowalski Mountain and welcome back to the homestead. Now yes, it is peach season in Kentucky. And our local orchard, Jackson's Orchard, is featuring Encore and Victoria peaches this week that are ripe and ready for eating. Now I am a sucker for a bargain. These are half bushel boxes, so I have a full bushel. To buy a half bushel box of first level peaches, you would pay almost $50 for this box. It would be $49 and some change for a full half bushel of fresh peaches in first. I always buy the seconds fruit because it's a lot cheaper. And while they're not perfect, they're definitely usable and they're always a bargain. Now normally a half bushel second box would cost me $25, which is half the price of buying the first. But this weekend they were doing a special and I got 2 boxes of seconds for $25 and I couldn't pass it up. So I've got a bushel of peaches. Today I'm going to start processing the peaches and come along and see what I'm going to make. Now today at Jackson's Orchard I bought 2 kinds of peaches. I have an Encore peach and I have a Victoria peach, and you can see they're a big difference in the size, but they're both a sweet peach. They are freestone peach. I think that's what they call them, freestone peach. I asked if they were good for the things I wanted to do and they said either would be fine. Now they only had 1 box of seconds each, so I got 1 of each and I'm going to mix them together in my projects. Now first thing up is going to be jam. Now that I have a dairy cow, I use a lot of jam because I use it to sweeten my yogurt. Now I'm going to be using the recipe on the Pomoa Pectin package, which I always find the recipes in the packages to be the best because they wouldn't want you to not have a good experience with their product. So I'm going to at least double this, if not quadruple the recipe. So we're going to start with 8 cups of peaches. And we're going to leave the skins on. Now I do need to cut off any of these bad spots. You know, that's what I'm agreeing to when I buy fruit that is seconds, that it's not going to be perfect, but it's still going to make very good products. Now I am going to leave the skin on my peaches. It will make a prettier jam than if I were to take them off. Now this is a really good example of a second peach. Now some of them have obvious blemishes, but this one is near perfect. It's probably a little bit misshapen, which is probably why it's considered a second, but this is a perfectly good peach. This one's going to go in the refrigerator for eating. Now I am using my outdoor Camp Chef burners, and I love this double burner because it allows me to have more than one thing going. I've got my water bath canner here heating up. It has the jars in it, and that needs to come to a boil. This is the peaches, and they need to cook down a little bit before I can make the jam. Now, while I love this burner and it works great for water bath canning, it's not good for pressure canning. And I kind of found that out the hard way. This particular stove does not have a fine enough temperature control for me to control the temperature when pressure canning at a very low temperature. Now I have another outdoor burner that I'm able to do that on, but not this one. So just be mindful when you're purchasing an outdoor canner or an outdoor burner for canning that you want super fine temperature control for pressure canning. Now when I'm boiling water, I can have it a little bit hotter. Now one thing I wanted to tell you also, whenever you purchase second fruits, be prepared to deal with it right away. Because they're imperfect, you need to process your canning right away. So when you buy that fruit, you've committed your weekend or your evening or your day to doing whatever it is you're going to do with it. Now in my case, with a full bushel, probably my whole weekend. But keep that in mind. They're not going to keep a real long because they're already bruised or imperfect in some way, which is why I got them at 75% off, but I have to deal with it right away. Now I'm going to let this cook a little bit and we're going to come back and make some jam. Now my fruit mixture is ready. And an individual recipe calls for 4 cups of mashed or cooked fruit. Now I measured it out and I have 20 cups. So we're doing 5 times a single recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and start measuring out my other ingredient. Now first up is some lemon juice. Now one of the reasons I've switched to using the Pomoa pectin is because it uses half the sugar of most jelly recipes. Now this does have 10 cups of sugar in it because I'm making a large batch of jam. This is 5 times the normal recipe. But a normal jam or jelly recipe is 1 cup of fruit to 1 cup of sugar generally, and so this is half that sugar. Now we found that to be plenty sweet and saves on resources and saves on the waistline. Now the jam is processing in the water bath canner, and they only need to process for 10 minutes. Now I actually made pint jars today, which is a little bit unusual for me. I usually do jam in half pint jars because it's a smaller amount. It's more user friendly because if you don't eat a ton of jam, you don't want this jar just sitting in the refrigerator for a really long time. But 2 reasons. First off is I have plenty of wide mouth lids, and I'm going to be using wide mouth jars today. Half pint jars only use a regular mouth lid, so that was the first reason I decided to do pints. Now the second reason is because I'm using the jam in my homemade yogurt that I make from my very own raw milk. Now with a half pint jar, I can put jam in my yogurt 4 or 5 times. So that means I'm going through a half pint jar every week to make my breakfast. So a pint jar will last a little bit longer in the refrigerator. So whatever you're choosing to process, you want to decide how you're going to use it to determine what kinds of jars. Now I do a lot of things in pints that some people put in quart jars, and because it fits our family better. So always consider how you're going to use your processed ingredients to determine how you're going to preserve it. Now these are ready. Now just so we don't shock the jars, I'm going to let them sit here for 5 to 10 minutes before I take them out of the canner so they can adjust to the air temperature so I don't crack my jars. Today is day 2 of peach processing, and on today's agenda, or first up on today's agenda, is peach salsa. Now this is actually why I wanted peaches, because I wanted to make some peach salsa. Now most of this was grown in my garden, not the onions, but everything here was grown in my garden, and the peaches are going to make a delightful fire roasted salsa. So let's get started. Now I'm going to be using mostly cherry tomatoes because I have so many of them that I want to use them up. Now while they require a little bit more work to process them, they make a really good salsa and they won't go to waste. Now these cherry tomatoes are from a volunteer tomato in my compost pile, which is going crazy. Now I'm laying the tomatoes on a tray because I'm going to run them under the broiler to give them a quick fire roasting. Now I am kind of cheating a little bit. It says to fire roast them in halves and then chop them later. I'm chopping one time, roasting and making salsa. I'm not going to do it twice. Now I'm taking a little break from prepping salsa because one of the things I want to make this evening requires a little bit of prep, and salsa's taking me a while. So one of the other things that I'm going to make with my fresh peaches is ice cream. Now I just got my Nutrimil ice cream maker, and we are loving having ice cream whenever we want it. Now these peaches have been blanched and I skinned them, kind of. It didn't peel great, but they're gonna go through the blender, so I don't think it matters. So right now I am just rough chopping these peaches, and I'm going to get them into a mixture with some sugar and some lemon juice so that they can release their juices and make a syrup that's going to flavor the ice cream. Now this is going to take a little time, and my ice cream ingredients all need to chill. So if I want this for dinner tonight, I've got to get it started now. Now I'm going to add a little bit of lemon juice to my peaches. And some sugar. And I'm going to let this sit so it can release its juices to make a peachy syrup that's going to become part of my ice cream. So this is going to get set aside and we're going to come back to it. Now I'm going to pivot a little bit with my salsa recipe. Now this recipe is a fire roasted salsa recipe. And I cut up my tomatoes and I put them in my little oven to broil them. And it's just not hot enough. It's not getting to a hot enough temperature to broil my food. So I cooked it, but I wasn't getting that fire charred look. And so I'm just gonna know my limitations and move on. So I'm not going to fire roast the rest of the ingredients. We're just gonna cook it and make a cooked salsa. And that's gonna be just fine. Now, if you have a grill, you can also grill your ingredients for your fire roasted salsa. That would be a good option to do that as well, but I don't have that option either. But that's all right, because this is going to make this move along a little bit faster. Now I do like the Encore ones, the larger ones better. They're definitely sweeter and softer. This other variety, which I forget what it is today, Princess something, a little bit more firm, not as sweet. This mixture of ingredients in this salsa is so pretty. It's just gorgeous. So many pretty colors. I used some purple peppers and green peppers and yellow and red, and then the peaches and the tomatoes. Everything looks beautiful. Now I'm going to add these extra ingredients, and then I'm going to get this cooking on the stove, and I'm also going to get the jars heating up and sterilizing so that this will be ready to can as soon as the salsa is done cooking. All right, let's stir this up. Now, while we wait on the salsa to cook, we're going to go back to the ice cream. So my peaches have made a beautiful syrup. And I'm just gonna scoop them out and put them in the blender, because I'm gonna blend them up to make them nice and smooth to mix throughout my ice cream. Now I've already mixed the cream and milk and other ingredients here, so I'm just going to dump in this juice and give this a stir. And this is going to go into my ice cream bowl. Now my ice cream maker came with this nice little lid. This makes it so easy to chill my ingredients. Now this is going to go into the freezer to chill it. Now I'm not going to let it freeze. I'm going to let it chill for several hours so it's nice and cold, and then I'm going to put it in the ice maker. This is going to get blend it up nice and smooth, and it's going to go in the refrigerator until it's time to add it to the ice cream. Now the last thing to add to the salsa is the cilantro, and I don't love cilantro. But I was afraid if I didn't add it that it would really alter the taste and flavor of the salsa so that it really wouldn't taste like salsa. Because this recipe doesn't really have any seasonings in it. It's all based on the vegetables that's in it. So I'm putting some cilantro in it. Not as much as it called for. Now this is going to get filled, leaving a 1/2 inch of headspace. Now, even though I started early this morning, the sun has caught me. Now, I won't move because it doesn't last too long right here. It'll just be hot during the time that it's here. All right, we're gonna let this come up to temperature and start processing that. Now these are gonna process for 20 minutes. Now the salsa is processing for the 20 minutes, so I've got a little breather here to figure out what I'm gonna do with the rest. I'm about halfway through the peaches. Now I've made jam, I've made salsa, I've made ice cream. And you know what? A lot of them we're gonna eat just like this. Now this is a funky peach, which is why it's a second, but there's nothing wrong with this peach. It's not bruised. It's got a little bad spot on it here. I won't eat that, no big deal. But a lot of them we're gonna eat just like this. Now these are the best ones. The smaller ones aren't as good as these. These are the best. I need to write it down so I remember which ones these are. Now one thing I wanted to make was peach pie filling. And I'm missing a really important ingredient. I actually have it on hand, but it's wrong and I didn't know it. The peach pie filling, you use clear gel in it to thicken it. And I have the instant, not the cook kind. I had no idea. I've used this before and I wondered why it didn't work good. And that's because it's instant and not the cooked kind. Now clear gel is something you have to order. I'm not going to be able to get it fast. And these peaches are not going to last. So I'm not going to be able to make any pie filling. Not that we really eat a lot of pie filling, but I would have used it for like cobbler, or maybe I would have made ice cream with it again. you know, I would have used it for things like that. Now I am going to freeze some of them. We like to use frozen fruit. I like to make smoothies with frozen fruit. And that's something I buy regularly. So I am going to freeze part of them in slices. Now the other thing I'm going to do with the rest is I'm going to can it. Now if you watched my video earlier this year where I made fruit leather from my canned fruit, you'll know that we don't love canned peaches. But freezer space is really limited. So I can't just load up the freezer with frozen fruit. Canning will allow me to make the peaches shelf stable. Now I can make fruit leather whenever I want to with my canned peaches. Now one of the reasons I'm not just going to go ahead and make a bunch of peach fruit leather is because we will eat it all. We really like fruit leather, and we would plow through the fruit leather and eat it way too fast. So by canning it, I can dish it out little by little. I can make it last a lot longer, and I can just make small batches of fruit leather at a time. So that's my current plan. Now both the frozen fruit and the canned fruit have to be blanched. The canned fruit will be peeled. The frozen fruit I'm going to leave the peels on just because they're pretty and it's easy and it's fine that way. But they does still have to be blanched. I guess this means it's time to move on to the next task. I need to find a few more jars. I need a few more jars for salsa. And then I'm going to get the water boiling for blanching. And I might have to move my table closer to my work area. Well, I blanched one peach for frozen peaches and decided I'm not going to mess with that because I don't like it pulling the skins off, and I want to keep the skins on. So I am just going to slice these and freeze them. And honestly, I don't think it's going to last long enough that it's going to matter. Now I've gone through my peaches, and I have about half of them left. Now of that half, I've pulled about half as many more that I need to process today. The rest are a little bit nicer, and they will be fine. I can get to them tomorrow, or we will save them for fresh eating. But the other half I wanted to make sure gets done today. Now of all the peaches, I've only had one that was completely unusable. I threw the whole thing into my compost bucket. But all the rest have been very good. Now this is going to go into the freezer. I'm going to freeze them solid, and then I'll pack them into Ziplocs. The last of the salsa. And there was just a smidge, like a quarter cup that didn't fit in that we got to eat. So I am very glad I added the cilantro. It definitely gives it that salsa-y taste that it needed. Now I'm working on canning peaches. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to score the end with a little X. And then that's going to get thrown into the hot water for 30 seconds to a minute. Now the important step that you don't want to skip is the cold water step. So once you pull it out of that hot water, you throw it into the cold water. And I have some ice bottles to keep my water cold without using a lot of ice. Now they have to cool pretty good for the skin to just peel right off. And if it doesn't peel off, you can throw it back in the hot water. I just tend to cut it off. Now once these are peeled, I'm slicing them and putting them into a mixture of fruit fresh so that they won't turn brown and ugly. Well friends, I'm going to put right up here all the things I was able to make with a bushel of peaches. Now I'm super excited to have gotten these peaches for 75% off, and now I've preserved them so that we can enjoy them for many months to come. As always friends, we really appreciate you watching. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that button. We'd love you to be a part of the Kowalski Mountain family. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.